Okay, let's start. Hello to everyone. This is Matteo Troncia representing ISGAN. Thank you for joining the webinar of today, the grid planning process as an enabler for the energy transition. Before proceeding with our speakers, allow me to introduce you to ISGAN, which is hosting this webinar. ISGAN is the short name for the International Smart Grid Action Network, a technology collaboration program of the International Energy Agency. ISGAN is also an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial, formally established in 2011. ISGAN creates a strategic platform to support high-level government attention and action for the accelerated development and deployment of smarter and cleaner electricity grids around the world. ISGAN consists of 27 contracted parties. The nominated representatives form the executive committee headed by the Presidium, assisted by 2 secretariats. The ISGAN's vision is to accelerate progress on key aspects of smart grid policy, technology, and investment through the voluntary participation by government in projects and programs. ISGAN activities focus on 5 principal areas: policy standards and regulation, finance and business models, technology system development, workforce skills and knowledge, users and consumers engagement. ISGAN facilitates dynamic knowledge sharing, technical assistance, peer review, and project coordination among its contracted parties. The value proposition of ISGAN relies on conference and workshops, policy and technology briefs, discussion and technical papers, casebooks, and webinars. Within ISGAN, virtual learning offers the ISGAN community means of rational and continuous technical skills update in the field of smart grids. The virtual learning is proposed as a set of learning and reading core modules dealing with the entire value chain of smart grids. The today's webinars concerns the grid planning process as an enabler for the energy transition, presenting the challenges and solutions related to long-term grid planning in order to have a process that is an enabler for the energy transition. Our speakers are Camille Hamon from Lede, Helena Lindquist from LightSwitch, both entities from Sweden, and then we will have special intervention from Eivind Gramme from Lede, Norway, and Gayathri, Nair, and Iris van der Lugt from IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. Please pose your question using the question and answer tool. The speakers will answer at the end of the presentation. The recording of the webinar will be available through our ISGAN YouTube channel. Okay, that's all for the ISGAN introduction. Now, I'm pleased to invite Camille to take the floor and start with the webinar.
Thank you, Matteo. I will share my screen now. Yep. So Helena, the floor is yours whenever you can see the screen.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. So I am Helena Lindquist, and I'm a knowledge sharing specialist from LightSwitch in Sweden. And
I am Camille Hamon. I'm a researcher at RISE Research Institute of Sweden here in Stockholm.
Yes, so together, Camille and I will be leading you through this ISGAN Virtual Learning webinar today, focusing on the network planning process as a key enabler for the energy transition. So we have the great privilege to act as spokesperson for the whole project organizing team, including also our dear colleagues Magnus Olofsson from the Swedish Energy Institute and Susanne Ackerby also from RISE. And of course, we also speak on behalf of all the project participants of the Network Planning Under Uncertainty project, who have been, of course, instrumental in co-creating the outcomes that we will be sharing with you today. And you see a picture there from our workshop in Berlin in March. So in today's webinar, Camille and I will talk both about the outcomes of this international knowledge sharing project, but we will also explain how we came to our conclusions, both thematically and methodically. So the agenda for today will give you a bit of a background on this project, the Network Planning Under Uncertainty project. And we will then go through how we explore this complex topic step by step and how we gradually funneled our collective thinking into 7 key messages to policymakers and energy sector stakeholders. And before opening up for some questions from the audience, we will also get some special interventions from or reflections from 3 of our project participants, as Matteo mentioned earlier. So we'll start by giving you a bit of a background and context to the Network Planning Under Uncertainty project. It is a project organized within the ISGAN knowledge sharing platform. And we started almost a year ago exactly, and we're now in the dissemination phase. And this has been an international project convening policymakers, transmission distribution system operators and researchers from 12 countries across 3 continents, as well as IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. And apart from the peer-to-peer learning and development of a new network of practitioners on this topic, we have produced a strong set of policy messages that we addressed to the Clean Energy Ministerial meeting in India in July. And this we will present to you a bit later. So this project was the 9th project developed within this ISGAN knowledge sharing platform, where peer-to-peer learning and co-creation takes center stage. So we would like to just give you some key characteristics of this approach that we have developed and refined in consecutive projects since 2016. So we work with a highly structured but still agile and learning focused process in several steps, every time with a tailor-made design to optimally support the objectives, context and thematics of the project that we have at hand. In this step-by-step approach, we gradually build collective understanding and insights through deep dive and explorative dialogue. And a key goal of each project is to leverage existing experience from different countries and different contexts and to co-create new knowledge based on this. So to achieve this, we strive to create a very informal and prestige-free atmosphere where people really feel comfortable to contribute in a collaborative problem-solving process. So we have seen that this way of working really fostered the development of new working relationships and networks between peers from different countries and contexts. And that's something that creates impact well beyond the projects themselves. So all of this creates high level of engagement and commitment amongst the project participants, but a further incentive to become and stay involved in the projects is that we always aim very high and focus on co-producing very concrete outcomes, namely quality policy guidance to ministerial level and the wider international energy community.
Thanks, Helena. And now I want to give you a bit of background to the project. So the idea originated in Sweden, where in 2021 we saw some new flow patterns in the grid, and that led to large cross-border capacity reductions because we have different bidding zones in Sweden. We have 4 of them, and therefore we saw some price differences, quite large ones across the country. And that got a lot of media attention. So the picture you see on the upper left, that's an excerpt from a very famous news program on the Swedish television, and they were talking about electricity prices and grid and such topics that are of interest to us today. So we were wondering at my research institute and at RISE why these flow patterns had not been identified before and why the weak parts of the grid had not been reinforced to avoid this exceptional situation where grid suddenly became a hot topic of the Swedish media. So we started a bit to probe for interest within the ISGAN community to work on this topic of grid planning and decided to scope the project in terms of how adequate or inadequate grid planning processes are to help achieve the net zero emission target and more widely some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So this topic has really started to gain traction lately in the media. You can see 2 here examples of quite recent articles, one from McKinsey & Company here in the middle, and on the upper right from the Financial Times, an opinion from the EU Commissioner for Energy. And they both point out that really that grid is a cornerstone of the energy transition. And also, if we look at estimations for the needed grid investments to reach net zero emissions, they need to double to 2030 and to triple to 2040 compared to today's levels. So this you can see maybe not clearly here on this picture, but you have on the lower left, you have some estimations from Bloomberg, and on the lower right from the IEA, and they both point to those figures, a doubling to 2030 and a tripling to 2040. So with that background, the scope of the project has been to share knowledge between participants from different countries about network planning processes, to identify barriers in current network planning processes that make them inadequate for achieving net zero emissions, and to co-create proposals for making them adequate.
Yes, so naturally, network planning does not happen in a vacuum. On the contrary, it's the planning processes are interconnected with and contingent on a large number of factors across several dimensions. So in this project, we therefore chose to look at network planning in the widest possible context, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we used the PESTEL framework to help us consider as many perspectives as possible on this issue, see political, economic, social, ecological, and so on. So this is just an illustration of our step-by-step project journey. And what we would like to emphasize here is that we always start the process with the detailed survey through which we extract knowledge about the context and specific experiences and challenges in the different participating countries. So the results of this survey is summarized in a project internal report aimed to prepare everyone for a really informed dialogue in the consecutive workshops. So in this way, they get a chance to acquaint themselves with the topic in focus and also think about the challenges in their countries, but they also get a very good background information about the situation in other countries. So in the ISGAN knowledge sharing projects over the years, we have used a wide array of collaborative methods. And this time in this project, we chose to analyze network planning by means of problem trees to try to untangle the complexity of these processes. So very briefly, it works like this. In the stem of the tree, you place a problem statement. In our case, we started out by summarizing the main problem, very generally as network planning processes are not adequate. And this identified problem has a number of root causes that normally interact in various complex ways, here illustrated in the roots of the tree. And then you have the consequences of these problems branching out in the crown of the tree.
Yes, so as Helena said, we used the problem tree methodology in the first workshop. That was a digital one to identify causes and consequences for inadequate network planning processes. So we co-created 4 problem trees similar to the one that you saw on the slide before. And each of those identified many causes and consequences for why network planning processes are inadequate today. So you can see a few examples on the right-hand side here. If we start with causes, so there are conflicting objectives in the network planning processes between different stakeholders, central and local governments, for example. There is a lot of uncertainty in the input, for example, on the scenarios for demand and the production mix. Of course, the planning processes are extremely complex, partly because it involves a lot of stakeholders. And the current methods and tools today are not sufficient to address those complex aspects and the uncertainty inherent in the process. Also, an important one that was mentioned many times in the project is that there is insufficient human resource capacity. We need a bigger workforce, and that steering mechanisms are not adequate. So those are just a few examples of what came out of this workshop. And in terms of consequences, This can lead to delays in grid expansion, which means that low carbon industries cannot start on time, that smart grid solutions may be underutilized, and that we may see adequacy or resiliency issues in the grid. So when we analyzed the results of this workshop, it showed that uncertainty and complexity were recurring themes throughout the answers we got, and it was decided to run then a second workshop to dig deeper into these two aspects. So in the second workshop then, which also was digital, we reused the problem tree methodology, but reformulating this time the problem formulation to network planning processes in a VUCA world are generally not adequate given the ambition to reach the SDGs. And VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which were aspects we wanted to focus on in this workshop. But we also wanted to capture more clearly different perspectives from policymakers, TSOs, and DSOs in particular. So we decided to divide ourselves in groups, focusing on these different perspectives. And we also wanted to nudge project participants to think about different dimensions of the problem formulation. So we asked them to use this PESTEL framework that Helena introduced a bit earlier. So the outcome then of this second workshop was 6 problem trees that were then condensed into 4 recurring themes to gather causes and consequences that you can see here on the right-hand side. So the first one is how to handle uncertainty, complexity, new risks and threats. The second one is what regulatory adaptations are required. The third one is how to develop and maintain a competent, capable and resilient workforce. And the fourth one is how to ensure efficient stakeholder coordination and engagement throughout the network planning process.
Yes, so when we had really worked really hard on understanding the challenges and problems associated with the network planning process in the first 2 workshops and subsequent analysis meetings. So in the third workshop, where we met physically in Berlin, we shifted to a more positive and forward-looking perspective. So we continued to use this tree analogy, but now we work to co-create solutions to the root causes of problems in the network planning process. So leading to more positive outcomes in different dimensions. And here we try to see how improved network planning processes could have a positive impact on the sustainable development goals and to understand those linkages.
Yes, so as Helena said, this led us to the third workshop, where we co-created solutions and proposals to address some of the identified problems in each of the 4 themes that I showed on the previous slide, and you can see again here on the right-hand side. So this third workshop was the first physical workshop in the project, and we realized how valuable it was to have met digitally before many times, so that we already knew each other and were comfortable sharing and brainstorming together. So that was also a learning outcome of this whole process. But solution trees were created and they were condensed into what we hope are crisp and short policy messages. And this was a refinement process. So these policy messages were then sent out for review to project participants and presented during an open consultation meeting to get as much feedback as possible.
Yes, so now the time has come to present these 7 key messages that have been condensed into this policy brief that was launched in conjunction with the Clean Energy Ministerial meeting in India. So you can actually see Luciano Martini holding the policy brief in his hands there. So we're very proud that we made it all the way. Yes, so we will go through these messages one by one and present them to you. So message number 1. Develop cohesive scenarios for the electricity sector that show the necessary electrification measures required to achieve net zero emissions.
Yes, and to give a little bit background, more background and details behind this particular one. So as we have seen, a cornerstone of being able to identify the need for network investments is to develop scenarios of how the electricity sector can be an enabler to reach net zero emissions, but not only for the electricity sector, but across the entire energy sector. And that's really important. This has been raised many times by many project participants. So this includes developing not only one, but several scenarios for the production mix and the demand, and considering the needed electrification in other sectors, such as transport, industry, heating, and cooling. So it was also raised many times during the project that this process of developing scenarios must be done in partnership with the key sector stakeholders in a transparent and inclusive way, because that will guarantee, we think, effective adoption and utilization of the developed scenarios by many actors.
Message number 2 then. Ensure that grid development plans enable deep decarbonization in line with the developed scenarios.
Yes, exactly. So after those scenarios have been developed, we need grid development plans, and they must be made to enable the realization of these scenarios that were developed, and therefore to reach net zero emissions. So one of the challenges here in developing grid investment plans is balancing conflicting goals between, for example, local and national levels, and between economic, social, and environmental considerations. So an effective grid development process requires the involvement of the affected stakeholders and populations, as well as political guidance to help balance those divergent goals.
Message number 3. Update existing cost-benefit analysis to properly capture the values of sufficient grid capacity and account for social, environmental, and resilience metrics.
Yes, so as we have seen, grid planning is an incredibly complex task. It's subject to many and large uncertainties in many dimensions, for example, the future demand, the production mix, costs, but also grids are cornerstone of the achievement of net zero emissions. And it also contributes to a variety of other SDGs in addition to SDG 7 on clean and affordable energy, for example, by increasing resilience against external threats. So despite the complexity of the process, it is really imperative to establish a clear, standardized and transparent grid planning assessment framework. And this framework must include economic, social and environmental dimensions, while also addressing risk and resilience factors. For example, a few examples that have come up during the project are threats from other sectors or extreme weather events as examples. So it is also vital to include all benefits of increasing grid capacity to properly value all grid development projects. And finally, it was mentioned by many project participants that it is of utmost importance to also capture consequences of inadequate grid development in the context of deep decarbonization of the economy. And because, as ENSOE recently put it in a recent report, the risk of underinvestment in this context cannot be underestimated. So just in summary, this message says that we need to measure the right metrics.
Message number 4. Ensure that regulatory frameworks foster both conventional and smart grid solutions contributing to the clean energy transition.
Yes, exactly. So with the fast-paced changes that we see occurring in the electricity sector, regulatory frameworks, they must be agile enough to accommodate the emergence of new actors, the increased use of both generation and demand-side flexibility, smart grid solutions, and new technologies like battery storage as examples. But also this agility must be balanced against the need for long-term legal and economic stability for sector stakeholders. And it was mentioned many times during the project that predictability for sector stakeholders is really crucial. So regulatory frameworks must also recognize the proactive nature of grid planning with its long lead times and therefore also large uncertainties. And to support this, for example, innovative regulatory tools such as regulatory sandboxes could be used more extensively to support the deployment of innovative solutions on this front.
Message number 5. Develop strategies to recruit and train a skilled workforce to satisfy both short and long-term competence needs.
Yes, and as we have seen, the need for investments in grid capacity is tremendous to reach net zero emissions, and that will require a much larger workforce than today at all levels. So adapting the current processes to ensure that grid development does not become a bottleneck in the achievement of net zero emissions will also increase then the demand for skilled workers with diverse backgrounds and competencies, such as in policy and regulation, engineering, environmental impact assessment, urban and rural planning, behavioral sciences, communication. So really a wide range of competencies. And therefore, substantial investments and collaboration between education, government, research, and industry stakeholders are needed to attract and nurture a skilled workforce.
Message number 6. Promote stakeholder interaction at all levels of the grid planning process.
So yeah, upgrading the grid planning process will require enhanced collaboration between government, industry, research, and other societal actors to share knowledge, to co-create solutions together for effective grid development. And as an example, need owners, such as network planners or operators, could communicate clearly on the challenges they see, so that external actors, such as research institutes, universities, could focus research efforts on those specific challenges. On a more specific level, for given grid development projects where conflicting goals often lead to long lead times, early stakeholder interaction and public engagement, in particular with the local communities, should be established to ensure productive collaboration, permitting, and decision making.
And the final one, message number 7. Increase awareness and understanding of the role of the electrical grid for meeting the Sustainable Development Goals.
So the importance of grid capacity can only be understood in the context of meeting the SDGs, and therefore it is really important to highlight the central role of electricity systems in achieving those SDGs to help increase acceptance of the necessary grid investments. So this would include not only SDG 7 on clean and affordable energy, but also other SDGs that grid development contributes to, such as climate action, poverty reduction, and innovation, among others. So now we have gone through the 7. So to summarize, this is the outcome of our project that has been condensed in those 7 policy messages. 1, develop proper scenarios for the entire energy system. 2, develop grid development plans in line with these scenarios. 3, measure the right metrics in cost-benefit analysis to capture the full benefits of grid investments and the risks of underinvestments. 4, upgrade regulatory frameworks to properly incentivize grid investments and its alternatives, recognizing the proactive nature of grid planning. 5, develop strategies to have the right workforce with the right competencies. 6, promote stakeholder interactions to share knowledge, co-create solutions, and help acceptance. And the 7th message communicated on the essential role of electric grids to meet the SDGs. So that wraps up the presentation of the outcomes of the project, and a more detailed report will be published later this year to complement the policy brief, so stay tuned for that. But for now, we would like to invite 3 guest speakers.
Yes, so we have, first up is Eivind Gramme from Lede, distribution system operator in Norway. And then we will have Gayathri Nair and Iris van der Lugt from IRENA to join us and share their reflections.
So first, we would like to welcome Eivind to give some perspectives. Hi, Eivind.
Hello. Thank you, Camille.
So just to set the scope, could you give some examples of challenges, projects, solutions from your organization related to network planning? And a second question, if you could give some examples of key takeaways from this project that are important for your organization. And I know you prepared some materials, so you can tell me just when to change.
Yeah, you can just start. Luckily, my presentation matches your question, so this will be very good. Yes, I'm going to give a short perspective based on your questions. And if we go further, just as a background, which is important to remember, is that our society is deeply dependent on electricity, and it is essential for nearly all we do, for modern homes, nursing homes, hospitals, school, transportation, businesses, industry, etc. And the use of electricity is enabled by the electricity networks, and having access to network capacity is a key enabler for increased economic value creation, increased welfare, and the realization of the climate goals. So it is important to have access to network capacity and be ordered to connect. This is a short image of electricity consumption in Norway. Until recently, it had a slow and steady growth. Started slowly, increased a lot during the 50s and 60s. It flattened out, but now again, the predictions forward are quite strong related to growth, and this is because of decarbonization. So something is happening here, and we have to be prepared, and we have to be able to supply the needed electricity. So if you go to the next slide. So what you see is a boom in the demand for electricity and therefore a boom in demand for network capacity. And why do we see that? Of course, the continuous development of society is still ongoing. Existing industrial plants need to develop to be competitive, and we still get new industrial plants. But maybe the main driver, which has been the focus of this project, is decarbonization, especially of transport industry. And the decarbonization could be many things, could be carbon capture and storage, but the most important thing is electrification. And then we need grid capacity. And in the area where I'm working on a DSO, which is situated in the southern part of Norway, and we supply in our area, there's a lot of heavy industry, fertilizer plants, plastic plants, cement factories, and all want to decarbonize. And then we need grid capacity. So we have some challenges. And one challenge is that regional distribution and the transmission networks are soon already at capacity. And lead times for new network capacity is often very long, but we need to connect new loads and changing loads soon, because the decarbonization goals can't wait and customers are waiting. So there's already a long connection queue, and it's growing by each day. And it's simply not possible to connect all the requests within a reasonable time. And of course, if society cannot get access to network capacity within a reasonable time, there will be losses, probably very high losses, related to economic value creation, welfare, and decarbonization. This is not good. And what are the underlying reasons for this? Of course, it has been difficult to foresee the impact of decarbonization. If you asked us like 10 years ago, we wouldn't have thought that demand was going to grow that fast and rapidly. But also, it's a regulatory issue, because over the last decades, the regulator, at least here in Norway, has given incentive for grid companies to be reactive and behind with investments and given us incentives to reduce operational risks. We have a cost of energy not supplied regulation, which, of course, if you increase operational risk, you will be punished to that regulation. And they want us to wait with investment until we have a customer. But if the investment takes like 5, 10, 15 years, customer can't wait that long. And how is it done? DSOs are penalized economically if they do measures that costs and increase operational risks to allow for more connections. And this is not the best incentive. And we also are penalized if you do interest-bearing investments in network capacity. It's best for us to wait as long as possible to do investments. So in a way, the regulation has been made for a different era, an era where we had sufficient with network capacity. But no, we don't have it anymore. So what could the solutions be? And I think it's not one solution, it's many solutions, and we have to work with all. You have to get a better understanding of the value of having access to network capacity. It's easier to do anticipatory investments if you know the value of doing it, having access to the capacity. You have to get a better understanding of tomorrow's need for network capacity by establishing good demand scenarios that takes decarbonization into account. A key message from this ISGAN project. We have to consider anticipatory investments in network capacity where such is smart, especially when lead times are long in these regional grids and transmission grids, and when there is little uncertainty about the need for capacity. We also have to establish capacity maps. The picture is in the bottom of the right part of the slide. Because such can reduce the risks of anticipated investments in network capacity. You can use these maps to market coming and unused capacity, and then the probability of that capacity is being used increases. And you also have to get a better understanding of the operational risk for planning and operational purposes, because then it's easier to take risk if you understand the risk. And you have to get systems and a toolbox of solution that allows for network operation with narrower margins and less reserves. e.g. safe operation beyond N-1. N-1 is quite risk averse. We have to connect more. And the reason why we have to take increased operational risk is because it's a high cost for society if we don't connect when we actually can do it by increasing the risk a little bit, because it's a loss. So this is the way to connect more while we wait for investments, which have been too late. And the thing is that the benefits for society by being able to allow for more connection can outweigh the cost and the risk by doing it. One example of an approach which could allow for more connections is by introducing several connection products. For example, you can have a connection products with a non-firm right to access to network reserves, and you can combine such a product with a system which enables automatic curtailment on the customer when it's needed. And preferably, it should not be curtailment to maintain N-1. It should be containment to allow for operations beyond -1, and it should be activated in case of, for example, faults, because then you use the network in the best way. You're not risk averse. You're controlling your risks, and you're taking advantage of the capacity which is really there. And at last, the incentive of the network regulation must become better aligned with what is beneficial for society. And we need a better usage of the established network capacity and a smart anticipated networks investments. If you just go to the next file. And the key takeaways from this knowledge sharing process, at least for me, was that we're all in this together. Our challenges are common. It's valuable to understand the future through the use of demand scenarios. And further development of society and decarbonization is based on having access to network capacity. And we need new knowledge, approaches, and solutions rapidly. So let us share more, inspire each other, and develop tomorrow's innovative solutions together. And we have to cooperate across nations, because we need the creativity, we need good solutions, and we need the best people to meet. And we have a lack of resources, then we can't afford to do everything in parallel at the same time. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Eivind, for those insights and some examples of what could be done in the context of those challenges. So next, I would like to invite Gayathri. Hi, Gayathri.
Hi, Camille. Thank you. Thank you for this invitation.
Yeah, sure. So next, or same questions to you, actually, if you could maybe give a few examples of challenges, projects, or solutions from your organization related to network planning, and also some examples of key takeaways from this project that are important within your organization. Thanks.
Thank you. So just a brief introduction about me. I am Gayathri Nair, and I work for the IRENA's Innovation and Technology Center. I work mostly on grid assessment studies for developing countries, and which recommend how to include more shares of renewables in the power system. And all what Camille, Helena have discussed in this earlier sessions are very crucial to us. I'll also point out some of the key messages that we tackle with on a daily basis. And I'll also like to add to our previous speaker, Eivind, to say that grid studies are very crucial in the planning and planning process, because it can help to factor these uncertainties. We always advise our member countries that we need a holistic approach to grid planning process on how to operate the grids, how to build further capacities, so that these studies can be done on a regular basis and can provide accurate insights. So to reflect on the key messages that have been showcased here, we believe that the key messages 1, 2, and 6 from the policy brief are very, very closely aligned with what we have been facing, because we always request that all the stakeholders who are part of the planning process, for example, when we talk about electric vehicle inclusion, we also request that not only the transport ministry, but also the power sector stakeholders are involved in the discussion. And this is something which brings all the parties on the same page. And then when we develop the model for the power system, we find that the model is accurate enough to at least give some insights on how to plan your infrastructure for charging, whether it's feasible to introduce vehicle to grid charging or not, and what are the challenges that comes up with it. So there are a lot of blind spots that we face when we do the planning studies, and we try to address them by bringing all the stakeholders on the same page. And for this, we usually start with insisting on formulating a working group, so that all of them are aligned on what we are doing and what needs to be included in the study, what needs to be avoided, and so on and so forth. Another thing that we also focus on is the key message 5, where the message talks about enhancing the capacity and developing a skilled workforce. And that's something we do on a regular basis. We try to have as many capacity building activities we can offer. We organize workshops, we organize software trainings. We also involve the utility staff from countries to be seconded personnel in our organization so that they can help us model the system with their knowledge of the system. And we hope that they take the knowledge of operating the software and go to the country to operate the system or plan for the system on a continual basis whenever there are changes happening in the system. So in addition to this, we also offer license to software for countries who cannot afford it. So we give access to the licenses that we have to certain power system software. One more addition is the key message 4. We have a grid code report that we have launched recently. In that, we were trying to ensure that grid codes or the regulating frameworks are made technology agnostic, so it doesn't create challenge to certain technologies, and it's open and free for all, or fair to all the participants in the network. So with this, I'll close my intervention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks a lot, Gayathri, for all the insights.
Thank you.
And now I would like to welcome Iris. So Iris, if you could maybe expand a bit on what Gayathri said and answer the same questions from your perspective. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. So thank you very much for the introduction and the presentation of your key messages and the whole project in general. I will now follow on Gayathri's presentation with an IRENA perspective from a slightly different team. So I'm also based in the IRENA Innovation Technology Center, but in a slightly different team. I'm in the Long-Term Energy Scenarios Network team. This network is also a SEM initiative, just like ISGAN is, but we have a slightly different focus. So we are a network of energy scenario practitioners. So we don't just focus on grids in the power sector, but on the energy system as a whole. But the ISGAN work is very relevant for our work as well. And we saw this at the recent SEM meeting in India, where the 7 key messages of ISGAN were also presented. We also held an event on long-term energy scenarios in general. And there we found that many of the participants also found the grid actors and authors of grid development plans should be key stakeholders in the development process of scenarios for the energy sector as a whole. So it's very good to see that the ISGAN work has come to a similar conclusion, that we need to keep talking to each other and not work in silos, but create harmonized and aligned energy strategies together. I also want to briefly highlight that besides the work for my team, the Long-Term Energy Scenario Network, the ISGAN work is also very relevant for other IRENA work. We, for example, are very active in the Continental Master Plan for Africa. This is a very large project with many different African governments where IRENA is working together to create a transmission master plan. So these 7 key messages have been shared with that team and are going to be put to very good use. And also we're updating 2 IRENA reports on smart grids very soon. So there, these messages will also feature. Now I want to briefly give some reflections on the 7 key messages that are on the screen right now, or just some of them, the ones that mostly resonate with us. So I want to first focus on key message 1, to develop cohesive scenarios for the electricity sector. Camille, you already mentioned in your background on this message that it's not just the electricity sector, but the whole energy system as a whole where scenarios need to be cohesive. Having aligned and unified energy scenarios sends a very strong message to potential investors and other stakeholders of a very strong unified national strategy for the energy system. When there are many different plans around for decarbonization, it's good to have a very strong national voice on the different scenarios that we see that could happen. And then I want to very briefly touch upon messages 6 and 7 to promote stakeholder interaction at all levels of the grid planning and to increase awareness and the understanding of the role of the electrical grid for meeting the SDGs. So in our work with the Long-Term Energy Scenarios Network, we found similar sentiments for the importance of stakeholder interaction and participatory processes, and also the need for harmonizing initiatives beyond the energy sector with our own long-term plans. We have a work stream on aligning energy and climate strategies within the Long-Term Energy Scenarios Network. So these messages very strongly resonate with us as well. So I want to finish by thanking you very much for involving us in this project. We're very happy that we could contribute, and yeah, we're very happy to stay in touch with ISGAN on related topics.
Thanks a lot, Iris, and thank you again, Eivind and Gayathri, for all your good insights. So now we want to open the floor to questions from you in the audience. Matteo, have we got any questions in the Q&A?
Hello, Camille. Yes, we got for now one question. So I encourage the audience to pose their questions to the speakers using the Microsoft Teams question and answer tool, or an alternative, the Slido tool. I posted in the chat the code. And well, before starting, I have a question for you that is like maybe broad, and it relates to the challenges of the today's long-term planning. Could you please elaborate on how these challenges are different compared to the challenges that were experienced 10 years ago?
Yeah, thanks, Matteo, for the question. Yeah, sure. So where we are today, it's a different context to, let's say, 20 years ago and more than this. First of all, in many countries, the power sector has been deregulated. So now the actors that plan production and transmission or distribution are different, which creates some new uncertainty for the network planners. Of course, we have the climate urgency, which really put some pressure to invest in a lot of fossil-free production capacity that must be connected to the grid, and the grid must be an enabler of this. And it's not only on the production side, but also on the demand side, where we saw it throughout this presentation, but there are a lot of processes that will need to be electrified. And for example, in the industry, in the transport sector, and that create also a need for more grid capacity. So all of this together means that we are at a completely different situation today than we were just 10 or 20 years ago.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you. Very clear. And yeah, from the audience, did you conduct any gap analysis of a really established method for grid planning? For example, the European 10-year National Development Plan process, and yes, which is also the first thing that you can improve from the planning processes that already exist.
So the first question maybe about this gap analysis. So we did go through, for example, ENTSO-E frameworks or guidelines for grid planning. So that's a background of this project. We didn't do a specific gap analysis on the established methods, but use them as like a collective material to inform the process, the whole project that we have led. And then your second question was, Matteo, about specific solution, is it?
Yes, if you have in mind something specific that can be improved considering the current approaches for network planning.
Yeah, so that will vary from country to country. What we have seen throughout the project is really that you have different conditions in different countries, and not two countries have the same settings for like legal settings, for example. So that will vary. But in those policy messages, we have tried to capture what is most in common between all those countries. So it's hard to just pick one, I would say. But maybe from my side, I think if the policy message 3, where we want to stress that you have to measure the right things. That's really important, because if you don't capture the benefit of grid investments, they will never realize. So measuring the right metrics is really important, I think. And of course, we also heard about stakeholder interaction a lot today. That's also really important. So you have, for example, scenarios that many stakeholders can use later if they were involved in the scenario development process. Yeah, so not one thing, but yeah, many things, I would say, need to be done.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I imagine a lot of things to change in order to address the complexity that we expect for the future. And yeah, another question from the audience, whether cost-benefit analysis for planning and beyond N-1 redundancy. Yeah, maybe, well, the question is not really clear. So are there some measures that can be already implemented easily in order to address the challenges that have been discussed, for example, to go beyond the N-1 redundancy as been mentioned?
Yeah, I'm trying to read the question as well. So whether cost-benefit analysis for planning of beyond N-1 redundancy would be, as most of the network would be non-utilized at most of the time. So I think that aligns quite well, if I understood it correctly, with what Eivind presented, that you have probably, it's not only the grid planning themselves, but also all the, let's say, power system security metrics that could be updated in order to make a better use of the grid. So it's not only on the planning side, but everything is connected. We need I don't remember which one of our guest speakers mentioned it, but we need a holistic approach for planning and operations. And I think that falls under that question.
Yeah, thank you. Then we have another question that is quite long. And yeah, it speaks about like the time window for operational security and the planning horizon. So related to policy message number 2, the grid development plans, considering the established generation mix and demand scenarios, often consider only peak loading snapshots. However, the operation of power systems need elaborated hourly analysis for a long planning horizon to bring out the challenges in operational security and possible adverse market prices. Is this gap being discussed among the utilities? As a researcher, who posed the question, often wonder how much thought is given to this direction when policies are drafted and regulations are enforced. So the question seems like highlighting a mismatch between like the technical procedures for planning processes and what regulation and policies used to recommend.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. So definitely this is something that is being discussed and was raised many times by the project participants. So the need to not only plan on let's say a few peak load scenarios, but to consider much more scenarios than before due to the huge uncertainty faced by the network planners. And that's not something to be stated directly in regulations or in policies, but it's something in the methods that the utilities develop and how they work with system planning. So this is definitely something that is discussed a lot within the utilities.
Thank you for your answer, Camille, very clear. Next question, are there any jurisdiction countries that have established a good grid planning framework that can serve as a role model for others?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't dare that saying that there is because all the countries have different conditions, but I think all countries have initiatives a bit on different topics or different aspects of grid planning. So that's why it's so good to have this kind of knowledge sharing projects so people can learn from each other. Maybe just as an example, in Sweden, we have huge electrification measures being taken in the industry in the northern part of Sweden, where the grid is quite weak. And so there have been some stakeholder forums that were implemented in order to gather industries, distribution network planners, operators, transmission planners and operators, and just to be sure to capture the full picture of what's needed over there. So that's an example in Sweden. And you have other good examples in other countries, of course.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Camille. Next questions. Yeah, this question relates deals with like the cross-sectoral impacts of network planning. The question is, how do you approach power grid planning in view of the complementarities and synergy with other networks like hydrogen pipelines?
Yeah, good question as well, and I don't have a very good answer for this one, except that it's what I think Gayathri mentioned. It's really important to bring the sector experts together, so that there is an understanding of what the other sectors, how they work, how they can be connected to the electricity sector, and to understand the needs and the specificities of each sector. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question. This is from the Slido tool. Yeah, it's about procedures. So, do you think that the system operators should follow more and more probabilistic approaches for decision support?
Yeah, also something that came up very often during the project, and that's definitely something that should be done. Yeah, to go towards a more probabilistic approach, in order to consider the uncertainty in a better way, capture the risks in a correct way, for example.
Yeah. And then there is another question that it's more related to TSO and DSOs. So it says if grid planning includes the TSO and DSO as a whole, or your search planning decision for TSO systematic nature and DSO local nature in an interactive way. So the planning process has to move toward more interaction between TSO and DSO planning.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement, but I agree. It's we need more. There is more collaboration and coordination needed between the TSO and DSOs. And again, different countries have different starting point here, because for some of them, those are the same actors, for example. And in some countries, those are completely different actors. In some, you have one TSO and 150 DSOs. So it's really different conditions in different countries. But in those countries where they are separate actors, then it's really important to align that those grid planning processes are aligned between the different actors.
Yeah, thank you. Another question that deals with the cross-sector planning. Yeah, the audience asked if you are aware of tools that address network planning from a cross-sector point of view that connect electricity with gas, heating and cooling, and other.
Not myself, but I'm not, let's say, a field expert in this cross-sectoral planning. But in the coming report that will be published later this year, we have a list of references of relevant work and reports on all the topics we have gone through today. So there may be some tools there of interest.
Okay, thank you. And we have the very last question that I think that well connects with this answer. So the question is, what are concrete next steps that you are planning after having extracted the 7 key messages that you presented today?
Yeah, so the 7 key messages, they are they are condensing everything we have done during this year of work, and complementing this. As I said, there would be a more detailed report going through more nuances of what has come out of all the work we have done. And later, of course, we would like to deep dive in some of those topics to make more thorough gap analysis and extract more messages from those different fields that we have covered.
Okay, thank you very much, Camille. This was the very last question. Yes, we look forward reading the report, and when it will be published, we will post a news on the ISGAN website, but also in the ISGAN LinkedIn page, so that yeah, everybody can get more details about the impressive work that you addressed in to extract those policy messages from a very technical topic like network planning and under uncertainty to enable energy transition. So, Camille, Helena, do you have any final thought, any final remark that you would like to share with the audience before closing?
Well, I just could add, well, thank you very much to all who have contributed to this work. It's really a collaborative effort, and we were privileged to be able to lead this and to be presenting the results today. So thank you all for coming, I guess.
Yeah, thank you all for being here and listening to our reporting of those interesting outcomes that we have got. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Helena. Thank you, Camille, for presenting today. And also thank you for the special intervention of your guests that enriched the discussion. And yeah, I thank also the audience for joining this webinar. And yeah, I invite you to join the next webinar that it will be in October. It will be advertised through the ISGAN channels, but I remind that we will have the recordings of this webinar in our YouTube channel, and you will get notice of this. So yeah, I now close the webinar. Thank you very much for your participation, and have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.